Stop, you haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now, we have new stories every day. Now let's go. I saw everything happen as if time had slowed down. It's strange how the brain processes moments like that. 1 second, I was upright, the next, I was being flung backward. Everything blurred, a shadowy figure, the ceiling, my feet, and then the ceiling again. The impact was brutal. My upper back hit the ground first with a sickening crunch. Pain exploded through me, sharp and overwhelming. I thought I was trapped in some horrible nightmare. When I finally regained consciousness, my head was pounding like a drum, and my body ached in ways I'd never felt before. I had no idea where I was. For a moment, I just lay there, trying to gather my bearings. Slowly, I opened my eyes to blinding fluorescent lights and plain ceiling tiles above me. The pain was so intense that I didn't dare move. Even breathing sent a stabbing ache through my torso. I wanted to cry out but stayed silent, focusing on making sense of what had just happened. Any attempt to move my head sent a fiery jolt down my spine. Even glancing sideways hurt. That's when I heard voices nearby, though they sounded distant and muffled. "Do you think he's going to make it?" one voice asked, probably a doctor. "Yes, but it'll take time," another replied. "When do you think he'll regain consciousness? He showed signs earlier but slipped back under. We'll just have to wait and see." The conversation drifted closer, and the details started sinking in. They mentioned I had no cranial bleeding, though there was swelling and a concussion. My left arm was fractured in multiple places, both the bones in my forearm and the upper arm. My back had taken most of the impact. The doctor explained how my fall started at the shoulder blades and ended with my head slamming into the base of the stairs. Apparently, my suit jacket saved my skin from being shredded, but my entire back was bruised. I pieced together bits of their conversation. My fall had been partially broken by the stairs, but they suspected a fracture in my sacrum or hip. The way they described it, I'd somehow surfed down 8 or 10 steps before coming to a stop. "What about the woman?" one of the voices asked. "She resisted being checked, but there was blood on her hands. We're gathering evidence. The man's right forearm has gouges running from his hand to his elbow. We'll confirm the cause, but the direction of the injuries doesn't match the fall." They discussed sending forensic reports and mentioned someone grabbing coffee for the officers outside. I listened, trying to calm my racing heart. My monitor beeped steadily, but the sound only added to my stress. The curtain around my bed rustled as someone adjusted the tape on my floor. "His coat sleeve was pushed up," one voice said. "That might explain the scratches." Another voice chimed in, "The neighbor recorded everything." A young woman was showing her parents her apartment when the shouting started. They caught a man and a woman on a landing, both half-dressed. The guy yelled something like, "They'll put you in your place, you pathetic loser," before shoving him. My mind reeled as I tried to process what I'd heard. Witnesses had seen and recorded what happened. The voices mentioned a young neighbor pointing me out when officers arrived, accusing the man of pushing me. They also said the man and woman lied, claiming I tripped over my own feet. It was laughable, though not to me. Lying there, I thought about everything. Should I tell the truth, or should I turn this to my advantage? He had pushed me. I could have died. 3 weeks earlier, I never imagined my life would take such a turn. Abigail, my wife, had left her phone on the bathroom counter while showering. A notification caught my eye. The message read, "Hey, sweetheart, I need you tomorrow for some hot fun." Same time, it was from her boss, someone I knew well. His name was Jeff Russell. That wasn't the first inappropriate text. A month ago, Jeff sent her a message saying she looked amazing and that he couldn't wait to see her again. Abigail brushed it off, claiming Jeff had meant to text his wife, whose name happened to be close to hers in his contact list. Jeff even called to apologize, saying he'd been trying to spice things up in his marriage. Abigail laughed it off and I, like an idiot, let it go. But this was different. There was no excuse this time. It was clear Abigail was cheating on me. I trusted her completely, though our marriage was rock solid. Turns out, I was wrong. We met in college, both business majors. We saw each other in classes, but didn't connect at first. I was your typical nerdy guy, and Abigail was the kind of girl every guy wanted. We weren't supposed to click, but we did. I wasn't awkward, just not athletic or the type usually seen with someone like her. At 5 feet 8 inches and 145 pounds, I wasn't exactly built, though my sister and her friends used to say I was decent looking. I joked once that I wasn't a stud, and everyone laughed. One time, I overheard Abigail telling my sister, "Your brother doesn't get teased because he teases back, and let me tell you, he's got nothing to be ashamed of." It left my sister and her friends flustered, but Abigail said it without a hint of embarrassment. She wasn't the kind of woman looking for a rich guy. We managed just fine, though we weren't wealthy. Abigail's real estate work covered her business expenses, and I took care of the rest with my sales rep job. After college, I worked hard to get my CPA and MBA, dreaming of opening my own office someday. That required long hours and frequent travel to meet clients across the region. When I started suspecting Abigail might be cheating, I paid closer attention. Jeff, her boss, was older, mid-40s, married, with 3 kids. Abigail and I didn't have kids yet, though I wanted to. We'd been discussing her going off the pill to try for a baby, but now I was relieved it hadn't happened. I couldn't imagine having a child with someone who'd betray me like this. That night, everything changed. Abigail was in the shower, and I should have been looking forward to what came next. She'd come out smelling amazing, expecting me to start things off gently, the way she liked. But I couldn't bring myself to care. I lied, saying I felt unwell, and locked myself in the bathroom. While she went to bed, I stayed up researching ways to spy on her phone. It turned out to be easier than I'd imagined. I installed an app and began tracking her texts and calls. What I found was worse than I expected. Jeff was a relentless flirt, and they were sneaking off together multiple times a week. Their messages were shameless, and I even recorded a particularly graphic phone call between them. I didn't need it for divorce proceedings. I was already planning to leave her, but I wanted undeniable proof. One of their conversations stuck with me. "Let's meet at your place this Thursday," Jeff suggested. "I love bending you over that couch and taking you hard." Abigail responded irritably, "Stop calling George a loser. It's disrespectful." Jeff just laughed, dismissing her. She defended me, saying, "George is just as big as you, if not bigger. You're rougher, though, and I like that sometimes." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She added, "He prefers making love, but sometimes I want it wild. That's why I keep coming back to you." They kept talking, throwing insults at me between their lewd remarks. Abigail even warned him to wear protection, saying we were planning to have a baby. Jeff whined about hating condoms, joking that if it broke, his swimmers might be better than mine. Abigail shut him down, saying if I got pregnant, George would contest it, and I'd come after you for child support. Do you really want that? Hearing her say she loved me while carrying on this affair was infuriating. She tried to justify it, claiming she wanted something wild occasionally, but it was all lies. I saved the recordings and texts. It wasn't just about proving her infidelity, it was about knowing for sure. Over the next 3 weeks, I prepared for the inevitable fallout. First, I paid off all our debts, including my student loans. Abigail didn't make much from her job, and I knew I'd have to pay alimony, so I cleared our account strategically. I prepaid my lawyer and reduced our savings to the bare minimum. I also started stashing cash to keep as much as possible out of her reach. By the time I filed the divorce papers, I was emotionally numb. I had a coworker cover for me one day so I could handle everything. I thought about how to confront them. At first, I pictured catching them in bed and chasing Jeff out with a weapon, but I wasn't stupid. Jeff was at least 6 feet 2 inches and 230 pounds, a former college football player. I wasn't about to pick a fight I couldn't win. The truth was, I didn't want to end up in jail. My friends all knew I had a concealed carry permit and usually carried a pistol when traveling, but I wasn't about to use it on Jeff. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just wanted out, and I wanted Abigail to face the consequences. When I arrived home and unlocked the apartment door, all my plans unraveled. Jeff's car was parked right next to Abigail's. I stepped inside quietly, making sure not to jingle my keys. Their noises hit me first, loud grunting and Abigail's voice moaning, "Do me harder." Her words struck like a hammer in my chest. There she was, bent over the couch as Jeff thrust into her like an animal. I froze for a second, anger boiling over, and then punched Jeff hard in the side. He yelled, tumbling off Abigail. "You psycho," he spat, quickly realizing what had happened. Jeff grabbed me by the suit coat and shook me like a rag doll as I tried to swing at him. My coat restricted me and I couldn't reach my pistol. My kicks barely made an impact. Abigail jumped in, clawing at my arm to stop me from drawing the weapon. Her nails tore through my skin, leaving 3 deep scratches. Jeff lifted me halfway off the ground, charged across the living room, and hurled me out the door. I crashed down the stairs, a sickening crunch echoing as my body hit the ground. Lying there in agony, I listened to the voices of the police and doctors, quickly formulating a plan. I groaned loudly to signal I was awake. The doctor examined me, saying I was lucky to have avoided worse injuries but should avoid movement for a while. When the cops asked for my side of the story, I recounted most of what happened, how I found Abigail and Jeff together, how Jeff threatened me, and how he pushed me down the stairs while Abigail egged him on. I made sure to emphasize that they both knew I was armed and feared I'd retaliate. Did I lie? Absolutely. Did I feel bad? Not one bit. They deserved it. Fortunately, the forensic evidence supported me. Jeff claimed he was defending himself and only pushed me after I attacked him. Abigail backed him up, saying she grabbed my arm to stop me from hitting him. Investigators discovered Jeff's DNA on my clothing. Traces on my pants confirmed close contact. There was also evidence of fluids on my leg, showing I must have kicked him in the groin while facing him. That was enough to dismantle the story that I'd fallen on my own. Jeff was charged with assault, posting a $5,000 bail to get out of jail. I wondered if he thought it was worth it. The full story didn't come out until later. My brothers deliberately withheld details, fearing they'd upset me. After giving my statement, I passed out from exhaustion. When I woke up in a dim hospital room, the events replayed in my mind. I decided then and there how I'd deal with Abigail and Jeff if I saw them again. They were cheaters, and one of them had tried to kill me. I planned to treat them accordingly. Not long after I woke up, Abigail showed up at the hospital. I immediately yelled, "Get her out." She helped him try to kill me. My brother burst into the room as Abigail protested, crying, "I didn't hurt you. I love you, but I wasn't having it. You were in on it. You grabbed my arm to help him throw me down the stairs," I shouted. My brothers escorted her out while she continued protesting. Deep down, I wanted answers. Why didn't she talk to me if she wanted something different? If she'd asked for rougher intimacy, I'd have done it. But cheating? That I couldn't forgive. The doctors kept me in the hospital for a week, monitoring my concussion and possible brain swelling. My brothers stayed by my side, but they struggled to believe what I told them about Abigail. I whispered to Greg one day. I exaggerated her role in what happened. He looked confused. "Why?" he asked. "I can always scale it back later," I said. "For now, I want her to feel the pain she caused me. She destroyed our marriage." The day I was discharged, I told Greg how I'd been monitoring Abigail's phone. "Tell her I'm hurt and angry but willing to talk when I'm ready," I instructed. Greg smirked, giving her a little hope before he'd crush it, like she did to you. I nodded, though I hated admitting it. I still loved her, and that only made the betrayal worse. The day after I woke up, Sharon, Jeff's wife, visited me. She'd heard about the assault charges but didn't know the full story. "Why was Jeff arrested?" she asked, sitting down with concern etched on her face. "He told me he was visiting Abigail because she was upset and you misunderstood." I almost laughed. "Jeff was having an affair with Abigail," I told her plainly. Sharon's face darkened. "Do you have proof?" she asked. I nodded. Texts, a phone recording, and even a video of them on the landing after Jeff threw me down the stairs. Sharon looked stunned. "You have all that?" I nodded again. "Jeff liked rough intimacy, didn't he?" I asked. She sighed, clearly piecing it together. "Yes, I have a prenup. If I prove he cheated, I get 70% of our assets. I'm divorcing him after his trial. You should protect your assets, too. He might try to hide money." I assured her I had already taken steps, including canceling joint credit cards and diverting funds. Sharon hugged me before leaving, thanking me for the evidence. After being discharged, I went to my family's fishing camp, using medical leave and vacation time to recover. My boss was sympathetic and found ways for me to work remotely so I didn't lose income. That morning, I canceled the remaining credit card Abigail could access, leaving her half of the balance, but nothing more. Rent and utilities were paid, but she'd get no additional support until the court ordered it. Sharon acted quickly, securing her 70% share and locking their accounts. Meanwhile, I called Abigail and told her where I was. She begged my brothers to let her talk to me in the hospital, but I told her come alone. If Jeff shows up, I'll assume he's here to finish the job and act accordingly. I wanted that on record, just in case. The meeting with Abigail was emotional, but not in the way I'd hoped. I still loved her, though not as much as before, and she claimed to love me, though clearly not enough to stay faithful. "I'm glad you let me come to talk," she said, parking her car. As we walked inside, she immediately started defending herself. "You know I wasn't trying to help Jeff hurt you," she began. I shrugged and waved her in, pretending I felt too weak to argue. "Can you grab us some drinks?" I asked casually. She knew the house well and headed to the kitchen for beers. While she was busy, I quietly set up video recordings aimed at the chair where she'd sit. When she returned, I broke the ice with a jab. "So are you trying to get me to say something on the record?" I asked. Abigail smiled and shook her head. "My phone's in my purse," she said, before suddenly stripping completely. "Want to do a cavity search?" she teased, swaying her hips playfully. She thought this was some kind of kinky game. A part of me might have been tempted if she hadn't been sleeping with her boss. "You might want to put some clothes on," I said, trying to keep my composure. She rolled her eyes. "Screw that. I'll stay naked. Just hand me a towel so I don't leave a trail on the chair," she quipped. "Are you sure you don't want to check for hidden recorders?" "Take your time, feel around," she added with a grin. She wasn't being sarcastic, she genuinely wanted to play. Abigail knew exactly how to push my buttons and was using it to her advantage. "Let's start with the real questions," I said, leaning forward. "Not just why you cheated, but why you helped him try to kill me." My voice cracked with restrained anger. Tears welled in her eyes. I wasn't trying to help him. I was trying to protect myself, she cried. I had no idea he'd push you. I was just trying to stop you from shooting him. Even when he pushed you outside, I thought he'd just close the door so we could get dressed and figure it out. But then he threw you down the stairs," she trailed off, looking horrified. "I finished for her, and left me lying there, unconscious. You didn't even check on me. Stella, the neighbor, said she knelt by me while you stood there in a rope, crying on the landing. Then you went inside, Jeff got dressed, and you both spun some story about me attacking him." Abigail looked away, guilt etched across her face. "How do you even know what we said?" she asked. "The cops interrogated me," I replied. "They had two liars telling the same story while I told the truth, despite a head injury. Jeff's assault charge proves they didn't believe you. Why did you lie to him?" Her voice cracked. "I was scared," she admitted. "Jeff said if you didn't remember anything, we could stick to the story and avoid trouble. He promised me we'd be fine if we kept up the lie. Even when you were okay, he said maybe you have amnesia. I went along with it because if the truth came out, Jeff would lose everything, and we'd both be in legal trouble." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "You were willing to risk me dying or losing my memory to protect him?" I asked coldly. She broke into sobs, trying to justify it. "Jeff thought he could make it up to me somehow. He even offered you money, $50,000 each, to change your story and say it was an accident. He said we could use it for counseling and I could quit my job so we could start over." I laughed bitterly. "You expect me to trust him?" Even if he had the money, his wife would notice a transfer like that. He wouldn't risk it. Abigail hesitated. "He's been hiding money for years," she said softly. "It's in a royal bank account in Jamaica under his son's name. He promised to share some if you change your story. Please, George, we can have a fresh start. You're the one I love. I want a family with you." I shook my head, smirking at her desperation. "Do you really think Jeff would follow through? He'd laugh at how gullible you were and how dumb I'd be for falling for it too. If that money even exists, it's for him, not us." Abigail looked thoughtful for a moment, but then shook her head. "We can trust him," she said weakly. "Fine," I replied, letting sarcasm drip from my words. "Show me proof. I want to see a bank transfer with routing and account numbers. Until then, forget it." I shifted gears. "Now, let's move on. Why him? Why did you let that guy into your bed? Was I not enough for you anymore?" Abigail teared up, avoiding my gaze. "How long have you known?" she asked. I stayed silent, letting her stew. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said softly. "We had a great marriage and an amazing sex life, at least until you got sick with that stomach bug and stopped being intimate for a while." "Oh God, that's when you found out." I nodded, watching her squirm. "It started about 3 months ago," she confessed. "At first, we didn't even sleep together. Jeff flirted a lot, but I brushed it off. Then one day he said he missed the wild, rough passion he used to have. Like a fool, I listened. That night, I practically attacked you in bed, trying to prove I still loved you. But after that, I wanted more. I started craving the high, and Jeff offered to give it to me. Eventually, I gave in." She wiped her eyes, her voice trembling. "It wasn't love. It was carnal, something I couldn't do with you because I loved you too much." "You mean you love cheating?" I said quietly. She flinched but didn't deny it. "Can't you forgive me? Claim me again, make me yours," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Bend me over and take me until I cry if that's what you need to move on. Just don't send me away." I handed her the pants she discarded earlier. "There's nothing to reclaim. You gave yourself to him," I said coldly. Without another word, she dressed, picked up her shoes and purse, and walked out the door. She paused on the porch, waiting for me to call her back. "I'm so sorry, George," she whispered before driving away. Once she was gone, I turned off the recordings, backed them up to the cloud, and called the lieutenant handling my case. "This is George Peterson," I said. "I've got a video you're going to want to see." While I was making video copies, my phone buzzed with a call from Abigail. I answered, curious about what she had to say after our conversation. "I'm just driving home from meeting George," she began. "He remembers everything, every detail. I'm glad you didn't come. He might have shot you if you'd shown up." I listened carefully as her tone shifted. "Recording the conversation was a bad idea," she admitted. "He called me out on it, so I stripped to prove I wasn't wired. He's that angry Jeff. I'd even begged him to take me to bed, but he wasn't having it." Jeff's laughter was bitter and cold. "What a fool," he said. "He's a total loser, too scared even for revenge sex." Abigail sighed. "Good thing he doesn't have any proof we've been screwing. Without it, his accusations are worthless." "We've been screwing," she corrected herself, as if that made a difference. "Yeah, well, we'll need to cool it," Jeff replied. "Sharon's keeping an eye on me. She's looking for proof to invoke the prenup. If I can get a clean 50-50 split and avoid paying alimony, I'll still have the brokerage. I can live on that. I can't support myself if George divorces me," Abigail said with a worried tone. "Even with alimony, it won't be enough. I just hope he moves on. I'll do anything, counseling, a postnuptial agreement, whatever it takes. I'll even wear a chastity belt if he asks. Jeff scoffed. Why bother? He's a loser. I'll send some business your way to keep you afloat, but we're laying low for now. No screwing until the assault charge clears. What did he say about the money? Abigail asked. He turned it down, said he'd need to see proof of the transfer first. He thinks I'm lying about the account and wouldn't pay anyway, Abigail explained. Jeff laughed again, nastier this time. He's probably right. Even if he agreed, I'd hand him $25,000 up front and accuse him of blackmail if he asked for more $100,000. I could have him taken out for less than that. Abigail's voice turned sharp. Don't say that again, Jeff. If you so much as joke about hurting him, I'll confess to everything. I'll record a full confession and send it to the police if George gets so much as gets dizzy and falls. Jeff quickly backtracked. Come on, I'm just running my mouth. I'd never do something like that. I recorded the entire conversation, feeling a mix of disgust and triumph. Not long after, Lieutenant Hudson arrived at the camp to review the evidence I had. He was impressed by the recording of Abigail's visit and took it to the assistant district attorney handling the case. This is gold, he said. We got the forensic results back too. There's DNA evidence on your pants, along with fluid smears on your leg. It matches the story you gave us about kicking him in the groin. The sofa, carpet, and even near the door have matching traces. This might be enough to upgrade the charges against Jeff to attempted murder. What about Abigail? I asked. She could face charges too, Hudson admitted. Her skin and blood under your fingernails show she definitely grabbed you. Her claim that she was stopping you from pulling your pistol could go either way, but the jury will decide. She's more likely to face accomplice charges, $500 in fines, and up to 5 years in prison. That's ridiculous, I muttered. Hudson shrugged. The law isn't perfect. The DA's leaning toward leniency for Abigail if she testifies against Jeff. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. I hated what Abigail had done, but didn't want her destroyed completely. That evening, my father-in-law, Edward, called. George, we just got back from our cruise and turned on our phones. We had messages saying you'd been hurt and might not make it. Then more saying you were okay and discharged. Are you all right? I'm fine now, I replied. But those messages leave a lot out. I didn't fall out as pushed. Abigail's boss tried to kill me after I caught them screwing in my living room. I heard Edward gasp and then murmur something to his wife. Her shocked wail followed. Need to talk to Abigail and hear her side, he said hesitantly. I'm not home right now, I replied, ending the call quickly. The next morning, I called my lawyer to check on the divorce paperwork. The papers were ready, but they needed Abigail's current location. The process server had checked her office in the apartment but hadn't found her. Later, Hudson called with an update. They'd arrested Jeff and Abigail at work. He'd taken the audio and video files to the ADA, who filed additional charges. Before we hung up, he cautioned me about discussing a bribe. It could make it look like you were open to taking the money, he warned. That's nonsense, I replied. I just wanted proof to pass to Sharon Russell. She's already working with her lawyer to track the money. Hudson nodded. Write a statement saying that. It's best to leave that investigation to others. The legally obtained information can't be used in court. Your recordings are fine, though, since you were part of the conversation. Jeff's charges were upgraded to attempted murder, and Abigail was charged as an accomplice. While I hated what she'd done, I didn't want her completely destroyed, especially if she testified against Jeff. Still, I made sure my lawyer knew where she was so she'd be served the divorce papers immediately after her release. A day later, my brother Greg and I returned to the apartment to collect my things. I wanted only my clothes, desktop computer, and the pistols I kept locked in the safe. The rest, everything that reminded me of Abigail, could stay. As we packed, her mother, Sylvia, arrived with Abigail's younger sister, Bella. Sylvia hugged me tightly. I can't believe Abigail would throw away what you two had for a fling, she said tearfully. Is there any way you could work through this? Not now, but maybe after counseling. Bella shook her head, clearly disagreeing, but Sylvia pressed on. Right before Edward and I left on our cruise, Abigail said you were trying for a baby. We were so excited for you too. I sighed, feeling the weight of it all. This isn't a simple fling, Sylvia. It went on for months. I have proof, audio, video, the works. Sylvia's face darkened. She made it sound like it was a one-time mistake and you were being unforgiving. No, I said firmly. It's bad. I don't want to hurt you with it, but the evidence is damning. Sylvia squared her shoulders. I'm a grown woman, George. I want to see everything. I don't care how bad it is. Cheating infuriates me. I had plenty of chances to stray from Edward over the years, but I never did. I agreed to share the audio files from my meeting with Abigail, along with the other recordings with her mother, Sylvia. Abigail's going to need your support, I said. She's in for a tough legal battle. Sylvia nodded. We'll support her, But that doesn't mean we can go on what she did, she replied firmly. I told them I was moving out and that Abigail could stay in the apartment, but Sylvia quickly shut that idea down. Abigail will be staying with us for now, she said. Bella, her younger sister, had insisted on it and went to pack some of Abigail's things. This is such a mess, Bella muttered, shaking her head as she rummaged through the closet. You don't even know the half of it, I replied. Bella sighed. I was 17 when you and Abigail got together. I was dating a football player, not sleeping with him, just dating. Mom made such a big deal about how Abigail hit the jackpot. She found a guy who'd love her forever like Dad. You weren't big or flashy, but you were good looking in your own way, someone a girl could come on. Smart and loyal. I laughed. You're making me sound like a border collie. Bella smirked. Don't be an ass. You know what I mean. I invite my sister. I kept dating guys, hoping to find someone like you, but I never did. She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around me and hug. I'm just going to say it. If my sister's dumb enough to give you up, I want you. I've loved you for a long time, George. I want you to know I'm here. I didn't know how to respond. I hugged her back, trying not to think about how close she was. She leaned up and kissed me, and I couldn't deny the effect she had on me. Abigail's entire family seemed to have that power. I pulled back gently, thanking her for her love and honesty. She smiled, but didn't push further. I'm moving to the fish camp, I said, changing the subject. Abigail doesn't have to leave the apartment. Bella shook her head. Ma isn't having it. Abigail messed things up with you. She wants her back at home where she can lecture her and keep an eye on her. I told Mama I'd move in with Abigail if it would help, but she said no. She's been telling me over and over that I need to live my own life and make my own decisions. Greg walked by, carrying another box to the car. My cast prevented me from lifting anything heavy, and the doctor had warned me about overexerting myself. Bella leaned in with a mischievous grin. I know where your fish camp is, George. You better get ready for me to visit, and maybe by then you'll be up for a little exertion. Hey there! A voice called from behind us. I turned to see Stella, the neighbor from across the landing. You're up and about, she said, smiling warmly. Then her eyes fell on the boxes we were stacking. You're not trying to carry those, are you? You know you're not supposed to lift anything. You had a pretty bad concussion. I raised an eyebrow. How do you know how bad my injuries were or what my doctor's orders are? And thank you, by the way, for helping me when I was hurt. I heard you were right there checking on me. Stella tugged at her scrub top's name tag. I'm a nurse, remember? I work in critical care, right near where you were treated. I mostly do cardiac, not neuro, but Lucy, the nurse taking care of you, was my roommate in nursing school. I kept tabs on you, I chuckled. The doctor said I just had a little swelling. Stella laughed and shook her head. Yeah, and that's like saying you had a little heart attack or were a little pregnant. You had a significant injury. Just because they said 7 to 10 days, take it slow. My advice? Make that a bare minimum. I told her I appreciated her concern and assured her that my brother was doing all the heavy lifting. I'm only packing clothes, I said, waving toward the bags. Still, you need to be careful, Stella replied. I was scared that night, honestly. I don't deal with neuro cases, but I was trained. When I saw you lying there, I worried you might have broken your neck. If you had, moving you could have been fatal. All I could do was loosen your tie, check your eyes, and hope you didn't move. The ambulance got there pretty fast, thank God. You still have the video you took? I asked. Stella nodded. My mom actually took most of the pictures and videos, but I have copies. Give me your number, and I'll send them to you. After she forwarded the video, Bella leaned over my shoulder to watch it with me. She snorted. No doubt what they were doing. Abigail's going to freak out when she finds out you saw her with that freshly drilled look. Stella smirked. You must be Abigail's sister. You look a lot like her. She leaned in and hugged me. Call me if you need someone to talk to, she whispered in my ear. Out loud, she added, take care of yourself, George. Slow and steady, no exertion. As she turned to leave, I couldn't help but notice a bit of a wiggle in her step, or maybe it was my imagination. Greg chuckled as we drove away. Man, your mother-in-law would jump your bones in a heartbeat if she were single. She's classy, loves her husband, but you can tell she's impressed by you. I laughed. Yeah, well, that's not happening. Greg wasn't done. Abigail's sister wants you too. She'd hop into bed with you if you let her. In that neighbor, the nurse, she's definitely interested. Come on, I said, shaking my head. Don't deny it. It's messed up, but you got options, little brother, he said with a laugh. By the time we reached the fish camp, I felt drained. I wanted the divorce to be as straightforward as possible and told my lawyer to offer Abigail a deal. I'd cover half her rent and utilities if she stayed in the apartment alone. I'd even offered to pay half of Abigail's grocery bill, provided it was spent on food for her alone and not on takeout or restaurant meals. I also agreed to keep her on my cell phone plan. This support would last for 2 years, giving her enough time to get back on her feet. When her lawyer did the math, he realized this was far better than the percentage of my income she'd get through the law. I knew he must have explained to her how restrictive it would be otherwise because she accepted my terms and signed without hesitation. Of course, Abigail had bigger problems than our divorce. She was facing charges for being an accomplice after the fact, accused of helping Jeff cover up his attempt to harm me. She was released on her own recognizance after her initial court appearance, but Jeff wasn't so fortunate. His attempted murder charge required a new bail to be set, and without access to his frozen accounts, he couldn't pay the bondsman fee. Sharon had taken 70% of their joint cash and locked down their investment accounts, leaving him with no collateral to secure a loan. I imagine him sitting in his cell, stewing in frustration. For someone who once fancied himself a big shot, he was now just another inmate. Sharon wasn't just vindictive, she was efficient. When I told her about Jeff's secret account in the Caribbean, she wasted no time investigating. To my surprise, the account was real. Sharon, her lawyer, and her son flew to Jamaica to retrieve the funds. Though Jeff's son wasn't on the signature card, the account was in his name, so he could legally transfer the money. I would have paid good money to see Jeff's face when he found out his hidden stash was gone. Since the account was in his son's name, it wasn't considered community property. Adding insult to injury, the IRS was bound to come after him for improperly giving money to a minor. No matter who ended up paying the taxes, Jeff wasn't going to see a dime of that money again. Sharon later told me that her son split the funds with his siblings, using it to pay for their college expenses. At least the Russell boys were honest with each other. By the time my divorce from Abigail was finalized, her criminal trial was still months away. It was linked to Jeff's trial since she was accused of helping him cover up his role in my attack. Sharon had ensured Jeff's financial resources were severely limited. He eventually agreed to sell his real estate franchise to fund his defense, signing a clause that barred him from starting another brokerage within 50 miles for 5 years. That alone made me smile. While waiting for the trial, Sharon and I had some dark humor moments about getting back at Jeff and Abigail. At one point, I joked about making a scandalous video to send to Jeff just to mess with his head. Sharon laughed, calling me a sick bastard, but she admitted the idea had some appeal. "You really want to stick it to them, don't you?" she said with a grin. We ultimately decided against it, but the thought alone was satisfying. The week before Jeff was supposed to make bail, Sharon and I visited him in jail. We spoke through a plexiglass window. Jeff scowled as soon as he saw me. "Why the hell are you here?" he snapped. Sharon leaned closer to the glass. "Because I deserve to be," she said, winking at him. I couldn't resist baiting him. I made a few crude gestures, flicking my tongue and miming a suggestive motion with my hands. Jeff turned bright red, his face contorted with rage. He picked up his chair and slammed it against the plexiglass repeatedly, shouting obscenities. The guards quickly subdued him, dragging him away. I later heard he spent 3 weeks in segregation and that his bail was delayed because he was now considered a threat to Sharon and me. At his trial, Jeff couldn't help but incriminate himself. He glared at me through much of the proceedings, barely paying attention to the testimony. When he took the stand, he initially denied threatening me but then blurted, "If I had the chance now, I'd make sure of it." From there, he spiraled into a rant, calling me a lying loser and insulting my family. His lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. The forensic evidence proved my story. Jeff had dragged me 15 feet to the top of the stairs before throwing me down. His courtroom outburst only reinforced the jury's decision. Though he was sentenced to 10 years instead of the possible 15, it was enough to ruin him. Abigail's testimony didn't help his case. She admitted that Jeff had once mentioned hiring someone to get rid of me. She also confirmed that he had fabricated the story about me overreacting and falling accidentally. At her own trial, she repeated this testimony, claiming she had been terrified at the time and thought I was dead. Despite her cooperation, she was sentenced to a year in jail. The judge reduced her sentence to 3 months but refused to let her off completely, citing her initial false statements to the police. When Abigail was released, she came to see me. "I want to apologize for everything," she said. "I also want to thank you for not spreading that video. It was bad enough you gave Mom the audio. She let me have it for what I did, cheating on you, destroying our marriage. She even saw Stella's mom's video. She told me if you weren't such a gentleman, you'd have shown it to everyone and disgraced me completely." "You deserve that lecture," I replied. Abigail's voice broke. "Is there any way we could work through this? Maybe with counseling? I'd even sign a post-nup." I shook my head. A prenup didn't stop Jeff. Why would I think a post-nup would stop you? Tears welled in her eyes. "I got stupid, George. I should have talked to you. Can we at least stay friends? Bella told me she wants to be with you someday." "That's not going to happen," I said firmly. Abigail left quietly, wishing me well and hoping I'd forgive her one day. Bella was persistent, but I ended it before it could start. While I liked her, I knew dating her would only cause problems within their family. I broke off all contact, though I occasionally saw them around town. Abigail moved to Mobile and took a job as a sales rep for a manufacturing company. I imagined she'd find someone soon enough. Meanwhile, Stella and I moved forward. We dated for a year before getting married and decided to start a family right away. She shared my views on trust and communication, which made all the difference. Life was good, but I kept one eye on the calendar, knowing Jeff would eventually get out of prison. A few months after the trial, I heard about Jeff's time in jail. He'd been moved to a new unit after getting into trouble in segregation. Rumor had it he'd been beaten in the showers and humiliated in unspeakable ways. I couldn't resist. I sent him a smiley face card with a message: "If you think I paid someone to do it, you're absolutely right." Maybe I'm a jerk, but only to those who try to hurt me. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.